Chapter 5. The Science of Disuse. When a person stops moving, the body begins to change. Muscles thin. Reflexes slow. The heart adapts to a smaller rhythm. It's not punishment. It's biology. The body, always efficient, rewires itself to match its environment. What most people don't realize is that the mind does the same thing. When emotional life goes unused, the brain trims away the circuits that sustain hope, curiosity, empathy, and motivation. That's not metaphor. It's neuroscience. And it's the core of what I call the science of disuse. How the brain learns to shrink. The human brain is an economy of effort. At birth, it overproduces synaptic connections. Millions more than it needs, and then begins a lifelong process of use it or lose it. The circuits we use most become highways, those we neglect dissolve into faint trails. That same rule applies not just to motor or sensory skills, but to emotional and relational ones. When a child is consistently ignored, criticized, or emotionally isolated, their brain adapts to that reality. It prunes away the expectation of empathy and strengthens the circuits for vigilance and withdrawal. Neuroscientists call this adaptive calibration. It's the brain's attempt to make suffering survivable. But over time, the adaptation becomes the disorder. The hippocampus, the memory and learning center, shrinks under chronic stress. The amygdala, the threat detector, grows hyperactive. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, empathy, and regulation, loses efficiency. In other words, the emotional brain learns to survive at the cost of thriving. When I first read those findings, it felt like someone had taken an MRI of my life. The biochemistry of being unseen. Neglect doesn't just change thoughts. It changes chemistry. Every time you reach for connection and don't receive it, the brain registers a social wound. Oxytocin, the hormone that bonds us to others, declines. Cortisol, the stress hormone, rises. Serotonin and dopamine, the messengers of mood and motivation, fluctuate unpredictably. The body moves into a chronic low-level fight or flight state. For a while you can live like that. You even look functional. But internally, the system is overclocking. A car idling at red line. Eventually, it burns out. That's when psychological atrophy sets in. The chemistry of connection is replaced by the chemistry of endurance. The isolation studies. Beginning in the 1950s, scientists started studying what happens to humans and animals in isolation. The results were disturbing and illuminating. Harry Harlow's rhesus monkeys clung to soft cloth surrogates instead of wire ones with food, proving that emotional comfort is a survival need. Solitary confinement research found that even short-term sensory and social deprivation causes hallucinations, anxiety, and cognitive decline. Modern fMRI studies show that loneliness activates the same pain centers in the brain as physical injury. Aging research links social isolation to higher risks of dementia, heart disease, and premature death. Developmental psychology confirms that neglected children show measurable delays in language, empathy, and self-regulation. Every study tells the same story: the brain is not designed to go it alone. Connection isn't just emotional, it's nutritional. Without it, the brain starves. Disuse in daily life. You don't need to live in solitary confinement to experience disuse. It happens in ordinary lives, quietly. A teenager whose family never asks about their feelings. A spouse who stops talking because every conversation turns to criticism. An elderly parent left out of family decisions. A friend who texts but never hears back. Each moment of ignored reach teaches the brain a micro lesson: don't bother. Over time, those lessons accumulate until whole parts of the psyche fall silent. Motivation fades. Joy feels foreign. Effort feels dangerous. This is the subtle science of disuse, the small, daily neglects that become neurological architecture. From adaptation to atrophy. At first, psychological disuse is adaptive. It saves energy. The mind learns to live on less stimulation, less risk, less vulnerability. But as the years go on, those same protective mechanisms turn against you. A person who suppresses emotion to avoid conflict loses emotional fluency. Someone who never receives empathy loses the ability to interpret it. Someone who learns to expect disappointment begins to self-sabotage before disappointment can arrive. This is the paradox of atrophy. The strategies that once kept you safe become the same ones that keep you small. And because the process is slow, it's rarely recognized until it's advanced. The brain's redemption clause, neuroplasticity. Here's the good news, the single most hopeful fact neuroscience has ever discovered. The brain can change back. Neuroplasticity means that the brain remains capable of forming new connections throughout life. Even after years of neglect, new relational and sensory experiences can rebuild the architecture of trust and emotion. Every time we try something new, learning a skill, expressing a feeling, forming a bond, neurons fire in new sequences. With repetition, those circuits strengthen. The mind literally reconditions itself. MRI studies show increased gray matter density in people who meditate, practice gratitude, or engage in meaningful community. Trauma survivors who participate in consistent therapy demonstrate measurable changes in amygdala and prefrontal regulation. Social reconnection is as biologically healing as medication or exercise. Healing isn't magic, it's mechanics. The psychology of reconditioning. If psychological atrophy is a loss of function through disuse, then healing is a return of function through safe repetition. That's what recovery really is, emotional physical therapy. Every act of honesty exercises a muscle of truth. Every act of forgiveness stretches empathy. Every time you stay present when you'd rather flee, the nervous system learns a new pattern. At first, it's exhausting, like rebuilding after an injury. But over time, what felt impossible becomes effortless. That's the hallmark of reconditioning, when what was once unsafe begins to feel natural again. Hope in motion. I remember my first small victory at reaching out recovery, laughing freely in a group conversation. For a split second, I forgot to brace myself. It wasn't monumental, but it was new. That night, my panic was quieter. My chest felt less tight. That's when I understood, healing doesn't arrive as lightning, it arrives as motion. Each safe interaction, each moment of being seen, tells the brain, it's okay to move again. Neurons fire. Pathways strengthen. The emotional muscles return. The collective science of belonging. What happens in individual brains scales to communities. Neighborhoods with higher trust and cooperation have lower rates of crime, illness, and addiction. Workplaces with psychological safety outperform those ruled by fear. Countries with stronger social support systems report higher happiness and longevity. Connection, it turns out, is not just moral, it's measurable. It's the ultimate antidote to disuse, both individually and collectively. If disconnection is disease, then belonging is biology. Closing reflection. The science of disuse teaches a truth both sobering and empowering. We are built to connect. When we don't, we decline. When we do, we rebuild. The mind is not a static organ but a living ecosystem, one that responds to every gesture of care, every act of courage, every safe human moment. No matter how long it's been idle, it remembers movement. It waits patiently for a signal that life is still worth reaching for. And when that signal finally arrives, through a kind word, a steady friendship, a second chance, the brain doesn't just respond. It rejoices. End of Chapter 5, The Science of Disuse. This one is pivotal. It connects the personal science of disconnection to the public consequences, showing how loneliness at home becomes corruption in society. Chapter 10, Psychedelics, Psilocybin, and the Neurobiology of Repair.